Hi. I know some of you are new to college this semester, and so I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about a little bit about how we learn and maybe help you develop some good habits and strategies for dealing with a class like this, which is going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of material. It's going to take you a lot of work to understand it. And despite what a lot of people say about biology, I find that there's not a ton of things to memorize in biology, but there are some things that we have to memorize. So I want you to have some strategies that you can use, fall back on, in order to do well in this class. So I wanted to start by looking at a guy called Ebbinghaus, who in the 1880s he did a bunch of experiments, I think on himself, where he just learned a bunch of whole sequences of letters and digits, basically meaningless data. And the experiment was to see how long he would retain that information, or conversely, how quickly he forgot it. And what he found was that the rate at which he forgot things was really fast at the beginning. So once he learned something, he forgot it really quickly. And you can see this on the orange lines on this graph. So initially, he forgot it really quickly. And if he didn't study it again, he would fairly quickly just simply lose it. He wouldn't be able to remember much at all. But what he found was that if he reviewed the information, if he reviewed the sequences that he was remembering and relearned them, then he would both bump his understanding of that topic, or boost his memory back up to remembering everything, and most importantly, the rate at which he forgot stuff, the slope of those curves you see there, the slope of those curves is much shallower. And so he would forget things more and more slowly the more times he studied, or the more times he repeated the exercise. So that the first time he forgot about half, in a very short amount of time, he forgot half or most of what he had learned. But after repeating this a couple of times, he ended up only forgetting 10 or 15% the fourth repetition, and about 5% by the fifth repetition. And so he was able to really retain a lot more of that just through the act of repetition. Now this seems like, if you think, oh gosh, well I'm going to have to study again and again and again in biology, well, it does seem really daunting, because on the one hand, you have to keep learning the same material, but you're supposed to be learning all this new material, and so relearning the old stuff and relearning the newer stuff, and stuff from 3 weeks ago, from 2 weeks ago, from 1 week ago, and it does seem like a lot. The good thing, however, is just to remember what the slope of these curves are like. The more you do it, the less quickly you forget things. Also, once you've relearned things a number of times, you only have to spend a few minutes, perhaps, on a whole chapter in order to learn things, because most of it is staying in your memory. So one of the things that I encourage you to do is to take notes while you read. There's a lot of information in the book, and I'm going to simply require you to know most of it, unfortunately. There's a number of ways to take notes, as you know, but one of the ways that's really particularly useful is to use Cornell notes. And on the right, you can write down a lot of the details, the keywords that you're learning, the concepts that you're learning, why something happens in the way that it does. And then below that, write a summary of all of the things that you've learned in that section of the book, or that chapter. Then on the left, you can write down absolutely the main ideas, and just the big questions, the big ideas. And the good thing about this, relating it back to Ebbinghaus's work, is that as you start to repeatedly refresh your memory, you have to relearn less and less of this material. So the first time, you'll be relearning a lot of it, using the information on the right. But as you go through it more and more, you can just learn the summary and know that you understand everything on the right just by learning the summary. And so that relearning process, the repetition, can become very, very much quicker. Another good, useful way to do notes is to make this sort of spoke and wheel diagram, where you put a central thing that you're learning about, and then branches from that to some of the details that you need to know. We're going to be, in the next video, we'll be learning about sort of unifying themes of biology, and we'll be talking about the different levels of organization and how properties emerge as you get more complex. We'll be talking about how information flows through biological systems and energy is stored and used and flows through. We'll also be talking about how biological entities interact with each other and with the abiotic environment, and of course how evolution sort of ties everything together. So if you take those ideas and you put them in a diagram like this, then what I find is that you can then think, okay, I know that I have to kind of learn and remember these five things. But each one of these diagrams could be different. You can use different colors, different shapes, and you might remember, yes, that's the one where I have to learn five different things. And so you can, in an exam or something, you could rack your brain and you could think of what those five different things were with this sort of mental image. You can close your eyes and have this mental image of these spokes to this wheel. So those are just a couple of strategies. One of the things that I give you and I require that you do in this course is to give you what I call reading guides, and these help make the learning process a little bit more active. And I think that by taking notes like this, with this kind of diagram or the Cornell notes, it'll also help to make your learning very active. It'll force you to engage your brain when you're reading so that you can think about things. So that hopefully your goal should be you only have to really thoroughly read the book once. You may have to look back for a couple of details or things that you realize later that you didn't really understand. That's totally normal. But you shouldn't have to really read the book more than once. And by really actively engaging your brain to do the reading guides or this kind of notes, I'm hoping that you can do it like that.